Good evening, and welcome to 60 Minutes. Tonight, we go back in time to the 1950s to revisit Ralph Ellison's classic, The Invisible Man. Tonight, we have an exclusive interview with The Invisible Man. Here it is. Born and raised in New England, The Invisible Man was a gifted individual who was black in a society that really only accepted whites. He went to college, being the first in the family, only to be kicked out for doing one white man's bidding that another one disagreed with. He then worked at a paint factory for a good long time until he got kicked out of that for trying to do what was right as well. He then began to work for a political organization called the Brotherhood, a representation of communism in New York. He quickly rose to being one of the best in Harlem at recruiting, but it was only downhill from there as he started to realize what was truly going on at the time and what made him invisible. What's your name?
I am the Invisible Man for all purposes. I don't need to reveal my identity to the outside world.
One of the things that we quoted from you was, "I was pulled this way and that for as long as I can remember. And my problem was that I always tried to go in everyone's way but my own. I have been called one thing and then another, while no one really wished to hear what I called myself. So after years of trying to adopt the opinions of others, I finally rebelled. I am an invisible man." What do you mean by rebelled?
What I mean by rebelled is that in my day and age, when I was growing up, when the book took place in the 50s and 60s, us as a people, the African American culture, was not accepted. We were not believed when we told the truth. People always used us as their fall man. We were everything they didn't want us to be. They just saw us as bodies. And so, what I mean by rebel is I shared my opinion. I told them what I thought, and they hated me for it. That's why I had to switch so many jobs, going from the chauffeur to working at a paint factory, and ending up working for the Communist Party.
Another thing that you were quoted saying was, "I am invisible, understand? Simply because people refuse to see me. Like the bodiless heads you see sometimes in circus sideshows, it is as though I have been surrounded by mirrors of hard, distorting glass. When they approach me, they see only my surroundings, themselves, or figments of their imaginations. Indeed, everything and anything except me." Is this an active choice by people, or a subconscious one forced upon them by society?
In most cases, I feel it's not an active choice people make to describe whether or not someone's invisible. It's mostly a cultural experience. And what I mean by that is the fact that we, as a people, have been neglected, our grandparents, by their grandparents. And so, they've been taught that we're worthless. And so, therefore, it's their society that's doing it. They're not making an active choice, but they're making the active choices to believe it. And there's only a few people out there that really see us for what we are as human beings.
So, this is just me personally. I grew up as a member of the white community in the 21st century, so I did not get to experience a lot of things you did. So compared to your day, would I be able to see it as a white male in your childhood, in your era?
It would be kind of hard for you to see what I went through. Most of the time we were ignored. We were told to not ever be seen, not ever be heard. Just be there if someone needs something and do your job. Some did see it for what it was, and they were raised in good households. But the majority did not see it. They just accepted it as a fact that we were not to be heard. We were invisible. We did not count for their society.
Another thing that we quoted you saying much later was, "I was never more hated than when I tried to be honest, or when, even as just now, I've tried to articulate exactly what I felt to be the truth. No one was satisfied." So that must have felt awful to be essentially ignored. How did you cope with being ignored by society on whole?
To cope, honestly, I didn't even cope that well. I slipped into bouts of depression. It was really hard for me to get involved in my work in the second half of my extension with the Communist Party. It was incredibly hard just to work because knowing that the person ahead of me was white and didn't really care about what I did or what I contributed to the workplace. Honestly, the only way to cope was to literally hope. Just hope that things would change and get better in the future.
Another thing you were recorded saying was, life is to be lived, not controlled, and humanity is won by continuing to play in the face of certain defeat. So what is your secret to keep going with the odds so not in your favor?
My secret to keep going with the odds not in my favor, I mentioned this a little bit earlier, is just hope. That's what got me to keep going, and just self-preservation. We're all fighting the fight to survive, some more than others, and just the desire, the will to live, to thrive. That's what kept me going. I wanted to find my place in society, and I wanted to contribute. I wanted to be the best at what I could do. I worked the best I could at the paint factory. I was the best chauffeur I could be. I did everything I was told. Did just like my grandfather told me to do. But it's just so hard when you're being oppressed.
Later on in your book, you are quoted to say, "I remember that I'm invisible and walk softly so as not to wake the sleeping ones. Sometimes it is best not to wake them. There are few things in the world as dangerous as sleepwalkers. Can you clarify what a sleepwalker is and what makes them so dangerous?"
So the sleepwalkers, they're an interesting concept. Those are the people that are oblivious to us as a society. They don't believe we are part of society, the African American culture. In fact, what they do believe is that we don't exist. And that's very dangerous for us, because when they do encounter us, when they're forced to see us, they often react violently. So, in a lot of cases, if someone of my skin tone was caught doing something, they would be punished harsher. They would lose their job automatically, even if it was something as minor as forgetting to pay your taxes. And that happened in my book. It was hard, because once those sleepwalkers awoke, it was very dangerous for us to continue to just be in their path, because once they're aware of what's going on, they don't like it. They don't like the change, and so therefore, it was just very dangerous to be in their way.
Another quote that you had was, "Everywhere I've turned, somebody has wanted to sacrifice me for my own good. Only they were the ones who benefited. And now we've started on the old sacrificial merry-go-round. At what point do we stop?" How do you get out of that cycle as a society?
So, with the merry-go-round, what I meant by that is the fact that we're just being used in the 50s and 60s, when I was still very, very young, long time ago, was the fact that we were used as industrial pawns. They gave us the hardest jobs, the most dangerous jobs. I worked with lead-based paint frequently. It was very dangerous. And this was all just for the success of some higher up above us that's getting paid for a product that we make. Well, we barely make minimum wage. They're dining on caviar. And when we complain, they don't hear our complaints. They either tell us to keep going or be fired. So to get out of that cycle of that merry-go-round, what we're going to need to do as a society is to say, no, that isn't right. These people have a voice that needs to be heard, and they're important. These people are more than just cogs in the machine of the industrial empire that is America. What we need to do is simply say, enough is enough.
This comes from our current president. This is what he said at one of his speeches. "Change will not come if we wait for some other person or some other time. We are the ones we've been waiting for. We are the change that we seek." So what do we need to do, in your opinion, for this change to take place?
I really like that we elected Barack Obama. That was impressive to see that man be elected. And I really do believe him in terms of we are the change. This new generation that is coming up, they will be the change. Things still exist in this world that are evil. You look around at Ferguson, you look around at Baltimore, you see all these things still cropping up. And it's up to the young generation. And for the most part, they have stood up and said it's enough. They've decided as a whole to pay attention in elections, to do their civil duties. And it's really becoming part of our culture, our American identity, by just doing this. It's incredibly valuable.
Now finally, my last question for you. So, to you, what does it mean to be an American?
To me, being an American is an exclusive group, and that's what we have to realize. As Americans, even today, we are not being inclusive. It's more often about what is not an American than what is. And it doesn't necessarily make you an American just to be born here, to be accepted in the culture. And that's what we have to realize as a people, that this needs to change. We need to become more accepted. In my day, black people were not accepted at all, and it was awful. The Hispanic community was not accepted at all. Basically, any community that wasn't white wasn't accepted. Now, it's gotten better today, but you can still see examples of this lack of acceptance in Ferguson, in Baltimore. It's just awful for our community as Americans. And so what we need to do to be an American, we need to redefine what it means. We need to become more accepting and less exclusive. An American means being united together under one flag, under one branch, being great together. And that's really what I've worked for my whole life. I did everything I could wherever I worked. When I was at the glue factory, I had the hardest jobs and I did the best I could. When I was the chauffeur, I drove so smoothly, it was amazing. When I worked for the Communist Party, I recruited as many people as I could. I was the best at what I did. And that's what we need to accept as Americans. That we, as a people, can do better as individuals when everybody is accepted within the terms of being an American.
I'm Connor Hughes, and tonight we dug deep into what it means to be an American. And we found out, more often than not, it's about what is not American about us, rather than what is. Over time, we've used artificial bonds, branches, to bind us together. But eventually, those differences will break and crack. And when that time comes, I hope we still have the invisible man to address it. This is Connor Hughes signing off from 60 Minutes. Good night. This comes much later, and right now, this is from our current president. Change will not come if we wait for some other person or some other time.